Donovan Follett. I'm a technical evangelist. I work out of the Developer and Platform Evangelism organization in Redmond, Washington. Developer and Platform Evangelism, we have the responsibility to work alongside of independent software vendors as they, as we are building our products out, and then they come alongside and get into the early adoption rhythm with our technologies as they're building forward. And so it's really a neat opportunity to be able to work with so many customers and partners in that capacity. I'm the Office Technical Evangelist, and I also do a little bit of work over on the SharePoint side. So in this case, today we're going to talk about SAP Interoperability with Duet Enterprise, Microsoft SharePoint, and SAP Business Connectivity Services, as well as Microsoft Office 2010. So we have a lot to cover today, so we'll just go ahead and move forward as quickly as possible. I have a couple demos, and we'll keep those hopefully warmed up and ready to go. All right, first today we're going to just take a little lap around Office Business Applications. What are Office Business Applications? First of all, let me just get a little sense here of how many people are on SharePoint 2010 already? Wow, great. How many then on Office 2010 as well? Okay, maybe just a few less people moving out that way. All right, how many have heard about Duet Enterprise? Wow. Okay. So that's very good. How many are developers? Okay. Good enough. All right. Well, that gives me a good sense of this. Okay. So we'll look at Office Business Applications. Then we'll look at SAP with respect to web services. That's the main way that I'm going to talk about today of connecting up with SAP is via the web services. Through business connectivity services. I know there are other ways to connect to SAP, but those aren't in scope today per se. And then I'm going to just take a quick walkthrough of Duet Enterprise. Okay, so Office Business Applications, what are they? Anytime we consider a line of business application, whether that's SAP or whether it's JD Edwards or PeopleSoft, or maybe one of your own home-built line of business applications, whatever that line of business application is, whenever that application is somehow connected up to either Office or to SharePoint, we consider that an OBA, or an Office Business Application. So if you are ever concerned, or not concerned, but interested in looking at the various Office Business Applications that we have case studies on, here's a case study by about the Mexico electrical utility. And in this case, it's just how an ISV hooked up SharePoint and Office and took advantage of a lot of the Microsoft platform capabilities with respect to productivity applications, and hook those up with the Mexico's electrical utility, and there were tremendous benefits because, again, anytime you can land line of business data in a familiar environment where your end users are already working and already familiar with, such as Excel and Word and PowerPoint, that is a productivity gain for you. And you don't have to necessarily do the training to be able to consume that line of business data in, say, Excel. And that was one of the things that came out of this case study is the individual just said, well, everybody knows Excel, so it saves a lot of training. But it increased collaboration. They realized cost reduction. And that's really where we want to be when we are building out our OBAs as developers. So that the end result of that is going to be some kind of a realized cost reduction. So if you're interested in reading about more of these, just simply go out to Microsoft.com/evidence and search for OBA, and there's a whole number of these case studies that are out there. But how are developers building out these OBAs? So, they're doing rich UI customizations. They are customizing ribbons. These might be document level add-ins, they might be application level add-ins, but this is one of the ways that we are accessing line of business data. So here we're surfacing line of business data directly into a task pane within Outlook. So that's one of the ways that we're bringing line of business data in, or developers are. And it's also just building on Office and SharePoint as a platform. So whether we are bringing data into business connectivity services like contacts or customer information, and then being able to push that over into Outlook, we are using SharePoint as a platform to be able to do that. As well as there are many developers out there using the OpenXML SDK, especially with the services, the word automation services that is new with SharePoint 2010. That's a great way to be able to do document assembly on the server and then have the timer jobs for word automation services pick that up and convert that to a PDF or an XPS, a fixed format file, where you can then move that on through email or whatever you might want to do with that document. So the OpenXML SDK is a very powerful tool. If you haven't used it, take a look at it. And it was fully updated for Office 2010, and that's the OpenXML SDK 2.0. So these are ways that developers are building out rich Office business applications. So why are we doing this? Well, to address the critical challenges. You know, your organization has a tremendous investment, not only in SharePoint and in Office, but also in the line of business systems that you use. And again, that might, in this case, SAP most likely, but it could be any the PeopleSoft systems, again, JD Edwards, etc. But we want to be able to leverage what's there. Those investments are already made. Let's see how we can better pull that data out and use it in other contexts. Increasing productivity, again, landing data in a familiar context for our end users helps that productivity gain. And then we just do things differently now. Everything just seems to be on this time warp. So we need things done faster and more quickly. And so that's just the organizational reality. So we have to be able, as IT, to be able to respond more quickly, but we also need to be able to do this in ways that we can track, in ways that we can meet the regulatory compliance types of things. And so we need to have standardized approaches in doing this. And then connecting data and people, but it's not just connecting data and people. It's once that the data is connected with people, people need to connect with each other around the data. So we really need to be able to surface data and then collaborate around that for decision making and get results more quickly. So Office Business Connectivity Services then, how many are using Office Business Connectivity Services with your SharePoint 2010? Okay, just a few. So that's good. Then that's good. That gives me, I'm making sure I have something good here to talk about to you. So Office Business Connectivity Services in SharePoint 2010 is that connection opportunity to your line of business data. Now in MOS 2007, we had the Business Data Catalog. And if any of you worked with MOS 2007 and the Business Data Catalog, you probably struggled a little bit because you just had to work it, okay, to make it go. You had to get down and muck around in XML and all that kind of stuff. In SharePoint 2010, Business Connectivity Services just became a really nice tool for us. I love it. I love to work with it. It's simple, it's wizard-driven, and you can connect up to line of business systems very nicely and very easily. So what does Business Connectivity Services do? Well, it gives that ability to extend the reach of that enterprise data now up into SharePoint. And it also gives you IT the ability to manage those reusable connections. So once you have and we'll talk a lot about this, but an external content type created under Business Connectivity Services in SharePoint 2010, once you have that external content type, that is the place or the single location that IT can control the knobs and control the filters and control the accesses to that line of business data, so that IT still maintains control of that reusable connection. And that's very important, because otherwise people are just connecting up to web service, and everybody wants to connect to the line of business data in a different way. This brings a nice way to scope that and for IT to be able to manage and reuse that connection. And then once that connection is there, then it's nice, it's easy then to build on top of that the custom solutions that you want to build. Whether you want to surface that line of business data into a Silverlight application, or consume it in an HTML page with JavaScript, or actually bring that into Office, any one of the Office applications, whether it's PowerPoint, Word, or Excel, surface that data in the rich client. All of those types of custom solutions are available to us just because we have that single connection then out as an ECT under SharePoint 2010. And we'll see and notice that Duet Enterprise uses that specifically as the best way to go about connecting to line of business data. So if we look at the business connectivity services architecture, and this is really kind of my agenda for the day, is that if you look down at the very bottom, you can see the variety of line of business ways that BCS can connect to line of business systems. It can connect directly to a web service, whether that's an ASMX web service or whether that is a WCF service. It can connect directly to a database. So if you have any SQL database, it can connect directly to that, as well as there's a number of other ways to connect. So you can build custom connections as well. But you have the business connectivity services layers down there. So we have the business data connectivity, so that's really the XML description of the connection, and that's going to be stored in an external content type repository within SharePoint 2010. But once we have that, then we can expose external lists on top of that. So I'll go more into that in detail in just a little bit. But then the Office clients. Now these are the Office 2010 clients. Okay? The Office 2010 clients have a business connectivity services client available to them and that works on them as well. So what that does is that it allows your Outlook, it allows your Word to be able to have a greater sense and awareness of external lists that are available out on SharePoint. And we'll look at that a little bit. And it also handles data synchronization in some automated ways, and we'll look at that as well. For developers then, the design tools that we use on the SharePoint side are SharePoint Designer. That's where we're going to go in, and that's where we do our work to build out our external content types, as well as Visual Studio. So, if you want to continue to extend your external content types, build custom external content types, you can do that in Visual Studio and use those. Okay. So, with respect to SAP extensibility, again, from today's perspective, we're only going to just kind of look at web services, and for the most part, I'm just going to assume that web services have been exposed on the SAP side. And there are a number of steps and a number of different ways, potentially, that you work to expose the web services on the SAP side, and I'm not an SAP expert, but essentially, to expose a web service to be able to be consumed as an external content type, that flat structure web service needs to be created over on the SharePoint side or on the SAP side, and then that's going to bubble up. And once you have that web service exposed, so its WSDL is exposed and its endpoint is exposed, that's where we can pick it up on the SharePoint 2010 side. And we'll get to that in just a minute. So, how are we going to go about doing this? Well, the first the first pillar here is that SAP data needs to be exposed. So that web service needs to be exposed. Now, how many of you in the room also do the SAP development? Okay, some of you. So what that means is the rest of you are consumers of that SAP development. And that's really on the SharePoint side, that's really where we're ready to pick things up. So we're going to assume that the SAP developers have used their tools to expose up a web service for us. Now, once that's been exposed, then our next step is to create an external content type for it and to secure that external content type. And what do I mean by secure it? Well, SharePoint 2010 has a number of ways that you can secure these content types. So how are you going to be how are you going to be accessing that web service as yourself, or are you going to be using another account to access that? That is the securing of the ECT that you have to determine. Now, primarily through SAP, you want the user, the SAP user name to be being passed across somehow. Well, out of the box, you're going to have to, that's not provided in SharePoint 2010. So you're going to have to determine how you are going to secure that external content type. And there's some ways that you can do that using the secure store within SharePoint, so that a user is going to have to authenticate at least the first time they hit that web service, okay? And then SharePoint 2010 will store their credentials and pass those through the next time. So that's one way that you can secure it. Another way is that maybe the service on the back end can be accessed with a service account, and the person who's actually accessing the data doesn't need to be known to the back end. You can configure SharePoint to work in that way, so that a service account will be accessing on behalf of the user. So there's a number of ways you can manage that, but the bottom line is you have to determine how to do that. Now, when we get to Duet Enterprise, that's a different story because that's a part of it. Sir, did you have a quick question? The connection, we'll see when we get to Duet about connecting up, okay? Okay, so once we have the external content type secured, then we can now consume that data, consume the data via an external list, so we can create an external list. And then once we have that, then we can use the BCS API, we can take the data offline, we have a number of things that we can do with it, with the data, and we'll see that. We can code directly against that external content type. And sometimes we can do it strictly with no-code ways. There are, with external lists, there are ways to just simply be able to do no-code types of solutions, which are nice. But also you can use .NET and Office extensibility to go directly against that external content type with the client object model for SharePoint. We can use OpenXML against it. We can put code against workflows, etc. So there's lots of ways that we can consume the line of business data as soon as we get it into an external content type. So what does it mean? Central to the picture, to the slide here, is that we have an external content type. What does it do? It essentially describes the methods that are going to be used to call into the back-end system, and those are the methods that were exposed in the web service, as well as it describes the data values that we want to retrieve back and the parameters that we want to push in. So that's the external content type. That's what makes it up. It's just an XML file that lines out what the connection is to that back-end data, okay, and how we're going to connect to it. Real quick question? Can you create sites or collections specific to these external content types? external content types are within a site collection. Okay? So they live within a site collection, and you'll see that. Okay? Once we have the external content type, then the user experience is abound for us in how we consume it. And all of these are optional, okay? Just because you have the external content type doesn't mean everybody can search it, all right? So, but we can open up that external content type so that it can be crawled by search. And according to permissions, people can then see only what they're supposed to be able to see. So that's the search down in the lower left-hand corner. External lists, we already have talked about those. But the data then can also be surfaced up into SharePoint Workspace. We can take that external list offline into SharePoint Workspace. And we can also take the data offline into Outlook. Let's say it's a contact type related information. We can take it directly into Outlook. And again, in Outlook 2010, in the Office 2010 clients, because the BCS client layer is in there, there's automatic synchronization capabilities. So if you are in SharePoint Workspace and you have permissions to be able to change the data, you can change the data, save it, and even if you are in an offline mode, that data will save locally, and when you're back hooked up and connected to the internet, then that synchronization will take place. There's ways to be able to manage that if there are conflicts and things like that. It's smart enough to be able to give you the option to make some choices there. And the same works with Outlook. Let's say you have customer information that you have contact information that you've synchronized down into Outlook. If you make a change and you have permissions to save that back, again, that will synchronize automatically. It's offline and online aware. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at some integration here. Make sure my demo machine is still awake. All right, so what I'm first going to show is a non-Duet scenario. And this is just consuming the web services, some web services that have been exposed on SAP, strictly with business connectivity services, as well as just consuming them directly in the client, which you can. So in this case, what I have is an Excel application here, and this is an application level add-in for a company called Contoso Tours, one of our favorite companies. And Contoso Tours builds out packages for training types of packages that can happen around the world in exotic kind of venues. So we'll go ahead and log in to SAP here. Yes, this is an application level add-in for Excel, all right? And what that went by really fast, all right? But this is a sample application kit, starter kit, that I'm going to put out on the web right after this week, okay? So. That's correct. I'll show you the code in just a couple minutes. We'll drill into the code a little bit. We won't glaze over on it, but I'll just kind of show you how it lays out. Yep. So, custom level add-in, VSTO add-in. It's added into this Excel document. Every one of the salespeople for Contoso Tours can now work with this special add-in, okay, into Excel. And there are a number of things that they can do with this. They can go ahead and manage the packages that are going to be used in the different sites around the world. So here's an administration around the world package. And I can go in and edit that package, and I can show all the different events around the world and the venues around the world where this package is going to take place. So it's Frankfurt, Singapore, San Francisco, New York, etc. So I can define the type of package that I want to make available to my customers. So I have 4 packages. We'll go ahead and close that. That's package management. Again, that just popped up, a Windows form. So right within my add-in, I have a Windows form that I can pop out and do that work with. I can manage the events themselves. So here are the different events that I can associate with the different packages, and I can edit the events. So I can, say when this event is going to take place, what is the price of the event, whether I'm a gold or a silver or a bronze, etc. I can associate a poster with this event. So this poster will be used in my, in different screens and presentations that come up. I also can identify the different venues for where these trainings are going to take place. So I can put all of that in here. Now, at this point, all of what I've showed you is SQL-related data. That's just stuff that I've done and built, and I have a SQL Server taking care of that, and all of that's stored out in SQL Server. SAP is not involved. However, when I come over to this side, now I have actual SAP data being retrieved, and this one takes just a couple seconds here because it pulls back 4,700 customers. But so I hit the web service. I'm actually within my Excel application, reaching out to the web service, hitting the customer's get list, the customer's get list method on my web service, and pulling that back. And then I'm going to be pushing that directly into my Excel document here because my staff wants to be able to work with customers and be able to do some mailings and things like that. So in this case, now that it's in here, we can go ahead and filter on specific countries. And now I just have all of my customer lists right in Excel, and Excel can do good things for me the way I'd like to. But I also can see all of the flight information that I have out in my SAP system. And so this is just standard SAP demo flight data, okay? So there's nothing fancy going on here. This is just demo flight data that's been seeded and is being populated now back into my Excel document. I'm going to hold questions, okay? And we can crank through them at the end. Thanks. So now I have my flight data coming back, and now it's here present. That's good. I can do a number of things with the flight data. Here I just have some conditional formatting that just helps me visually be able to see information that's important to me as a sales agent. But it's not just seeing the data, it's being able to work with a customer now and having them buy one of these packages. So when I click on the Buy button up in my menu bar, then I have a custom task pane that loads on the right-hand side over here. And the custom task pane is retrieving data out of the SQL database. And so now I have all the packages that are available to me that I have stored in my SQL database. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the Office Development one for in Visual Studio around the world. And what I've done here is I can click on View Presentation. And if I'm working with a customer and I want to show that customer some of the types of things that are going to be available, I am now just on the fly using the OpenXML SDK. I'm pulling data out of SAP, I'm pulling data out of SQL Server, and I'm pushing that dynamically right now into this PowerPoint presentation, and I just built this on the fly. So my PowerPoint presentation right now is 100% built dynamically, talking about our Frankfurt, Germany tour here. And here's some event pricing. And I could have all kinds of information here available to my customer so they can see, well, what's the breakdown of gold packages and silver packages and bronze packages? How many people are attending? Where are they all coming from? So this is the kind of thing that can be done. And it's all done just dynamically off on the fly. So go ahead and close out of that. We'll come back into my spreadsheet here, but it's not just showing them a PowerPoint presentation. We want them to actually buy the package. So in this case, now I reached out to SAP. I've pulled in to all of my customers here. So I'm going to book James. And here we can see that this package only has one event associated with it. So I'll reach out and to the Bavarian Castle Travel Agency and search the flight data and see what flights are available right around the time that that event's going to take place. So I have a number of flights I can choose here that will go from San Francisco to Frankfurt. I'll go ahead and choose this flight, click OK, and save. And now that data has been saved directly back into SAP. All right, so another little part of the add-in has to do with analysis. So I can click on this button, and now I have my analysis part of the ribbon showing. And here I can just show package sales and package sales for this demo. Here's some, here's the number of sales so far. They're all gold. They're all gold. I haven't sold any silver or bronze yet. So at any rate, Excel is now being used the way you want Excel to be used, and it's used for analysis, and it's pulling data in, and it's formatting the data nicely as well. So again, all of this code is going to be online for you to be able to look at and work with shortly after the conference. Okay, but what does that mean then as far as a developer, from a developer's perspective? Let's go ahead and go into the Excel add-in right now that we're building in Visual Studio. You can see it's a pretty complex solution in the fact that it has a lot of stuff going on. But we'll just highlight a couple things here. First of all, in Visual Studio 2010, we have the new Ribbon Designer UI. So if your ribbons are not super complex, then you can go ahead and use the Ribbon Designer UI. And by super complex, I probably should try and clarify that just a little bit. If you're using these standard types of ribbon controls, then those are just drag and drop on, just like you would build out a form. You drag and drop those on, click on them, you get your event handler in behind, and you put your code. So that's very straightforward. If you're doing some other types of things with the ribbon, then you would just need to drop down into the ribbon XML, and you can do what you want to do in the XML itself. But this was a nice feature to Visual Studio 2010, and so we've used it here. Now let's just take a look real quick at, let's go into the customers method here. So we'll go ahead and close this out. So click for customers. We want to return that list and load up the spreadsheet with that list. So essentially what we're going to do is we'll have a little backgrounder process working here because we don't want to tie up the UI thread. So we're going to go ahead and put a little backgrounder process in to go ahead and actually go out and crank through the call to SAP and retrieve the data back. So in this case, we're going to simply, we're going to use a database entity. That's one thing that I want to show you here. This also has a full data model for what we're using within Visual Studio, all the data entities that we're using within Visual Studio, so it makes it nice and easy to be able to work your way around. So we're going to have a Contoso Tours database entity, new up that, and then we'll new up a table here, and this is our class for the call back to the web service, okay? So we instantiate the class for customer, and then on that class we call the getList method, and if we go down into that class, you will see that that's where everything gets packaged up, the credentials get added on to the web service call back into SAP on the customer, okay? And it retrieves the list. When we retrieve the list, then we're simply going to push that into our customer table, etc. So that's just, programming goo at that point. But the point is that you have control as the developer to be able to reach back into SAP and pull the data back, display it nicely in whatever Office application you want. All right, now, the thing about that, though, is, again, you are managing the credentials and the path back, okay? So you're managing all of that yourself. And that's fine. It's just a decision that you have to make from an enterprise perspective, if that's good for you. All right. Well, that was the client side. So now, though, let's go over on the SharePoint side, and let's look at the SharePoint 2010 site, because this is where we want to start thinking about that external content type and hooking up to that same customer web service to be able to pull back the customer list into SharePoint and what we might want to be able to do there. So in this case, we'll go ahead and here's the Contoso Tours site, SharePoint site that the team has. But just a second here. Let me go into the right application. We'll go into SharePoint Designer. And SharePoint Designer for 2010 was completely reworked. You've probably worked with it already, since so many of you are already on SharePoint 2010. And this is the Contoso site collection. We'll go to the external content types for the site collection. And here we can see that we have connected up to, we have created an external content type named customers that we have connected up to WCF, but really it's just an ASMX service. We'll go ahead and open this, and we can look at the connection here. So in this case, we'll go into the external connection, and here you can see we have the service endpoint that's been exposed, okay, that we need to hit, as well as here is the WSDL endpoint. So that's where this is in where we tell SharePoint for our XML file that's going to be stored down in SharePoint for this connection to this line of business system. This is where we tell the ECT what the endpoints are. So in this case, we've just defined the endpoints. So we'll cancel out of that. But you can also see with the external content type the data values that are going to be brought back. And in this case, we have a read list method which says, get me all the customers, and we have a specific finder method which says, get me just this specific customer. So that's our external content type. Now that the external content type is available, we can build an external list off of that. And so that would be just simply going into, where's my view all site content, create, and choose choose lists. And we have an external list. We would create an external list. We would provide it a name, and then we can click the selection down here on the right-hand side and have a menu selection here, a selection list of all of the external ECTs that are available to us that we might want to expose as an external list. Now, I've already done this. I just wanted you to see the steps. So we'll cancel out of that. Come back to our main site. So with that is this connection right here. When I click on external list, that has gone back through the external content type, reached back into SAP for me, and surfaced all of the customer information right here. Now that's good. It's not necessarily the most convenient or easy to use way to expose our customers. Our customer list, and I could create one of these for flight information as well. But in this case, what I want to show is that now that we have that external list available to us, we can put Silverlight on top of that as our UI front end, as the way we want to expose that list up to the users. So what I've done, and I'll show you this project in just a minute, what I've done is I've built a little Silverlight application that shows both customer information and the flight schedules. And so now I have total control of the way I want to view this, but I'm simply using the client object model for Silverlight, the client-side object model for Silverlight, to be able to retrieve the data from the list and to expose it here. So in this case, I'll just put in A, and we'll search. And so now we're actually, even though we're in Silverlight, we're still going back through the external content type, retrieving the data, exposing it up. We have total control over that now. So let's go ahead. We can narrow our search here. We can simply do by country. And so now, again, I'm in control of my user experience and what I'm showing to my users. With respect to flight data, I can do Japan, get the Japan Airlines. And so here I have flight data now. So it's a simple little Silverlight application using the client object model to retrieve data from the line of business system through the external content type. Let me just go ahead and show you the code on that. So here, so how many of you have worked with Silverlight or WPF? Okay, some of you have. All right, so here I just have a simple Silverlight application, has a few controls on it. In this case, we just are using a grid control. But with respect to retrieving the data, how do I go about that? So button search customer right here. So what I'm going to do is simply new up grab the client context, and I can use client context.current here. And I can use that because I'm on the SharePoint site. Okay? If I was using the client-side object model out in, let's say, a Word application and calling back in, or I was using Silverlight from a web application calling back in, then I would need to new up a client context, provide the URL, and provide some of that front-end goo so that the client context knows where to go, which SharePoint site to go to be able to get this data. But in this case, because I'm on SharePoint itself, I can simply use client context.current. And then, again, I'm just going to return all the customers. I'm going to get the list by title, return all the customers. And because I'm in Silverlight, it's asynchronous. So if the call succeeded, I'm going to execute this method. If the call fails, I'm going to execute this method. In this sense here, I have a succeeded customer callback method that will fire. And in this case, all I'm doing now is I'm just kind of filtering the data and displaying to the user what they wanted to see on the screen, okay, by the filters. Now, in this case, I'm not passing parameter data into the web service because I'm coming through the external content type. However, you could be able to do that as well. Okay, so that shows the scenario where you are going, as a developer, are going against SAP Web Services on your own. Okay, you're managing everything. So that's a little bit different then from when we get to the Duet Enterprise scenario. Okay, so your development methodology for server side is very straightforward. You're going to consume the line of business data exposed by a web service, creating an external content type, associating the external content type with an external list. There are no code options available to you, which I didn't show you, which would be good to show you. Let me just come back into here on that. So if I come to the external content type, external list, and once this loads, you can see up here in the upper top I have a tab that if I click on the List tab, I can go sync to SharePoint Workspace. With a single click, I can take this entire list offline into SharePoint Workspace, which is my rich client application. So I've synchronized my list down into SharePoint Workspace. If I have read-write capabilities, this is strictly, I only had get items, I didn't have write items, okay? So in this case, I can't save data back, but I can see the data and have it on my desktop, so when I'm on my laptop with me, so when I'm traveling, it's already there. All right? Also, there is this connect to Outlook, and if you are to use this element right here, Office Item Type, and use Contact, okay? And because customer data is very contact-like, it has addresses and names and phone numbers and all of that, what you can do is you can set this Office Item Type to Contact, and what that means is the external content type then knows that that is nicely configurable down into Output or to be into Outlook to be able to push directly down into Outlook. So I can take this entire list into my Outlook contacts if I want to. Now those are not Exchange contacts, those are Outlook contacts for this external list. And again, you can manage that on your own. All right, so let's go ahead and come back over here. So we have no-code solutions to take it offline, and then we can access our external list with the Office Client Silverlight using the client-side object model. From the Office Client perspective, we can consume line of business exposed by the web service directly. We can build document level and application level add-ins. We can consume the line of business exposed by external list, either using the the client-side object model, or to use the web references, which that's the way we did it in Excel. We just went directly against the web services. So Duet Enterprise. How do things change for us with Duet Enterprise? And how does Duet Enterprise make it better? So in this case, we have two really familiar and broadly used applications. One for process and one for collaboration. SAP is powerful in process, and SharePoint is powerful in its collaboration capabilities. So with Duet Enterprise, we have provided this interoperability layer between SharePoint and SAP. And that interoperability layer manages for us many things that we don't have to manage as developers anymore. It manages that whole authentication and authorization capability. It provides us single sign-on between these two systems, okay? Because an SAP user is not necessarily a Windows Active Directory user. I mean, they're both employees of the company, but you might have different identities for them in the different systems. Duet Enterprise helps us manage that. It also, at the interoperability layer, helps manage manageability and supportability of the entire environment. And then Duet Enterprise layers on top of that what we call a number of ready-to-use capabilities, so that workflows that are over in SAP can now be surfaced over in SharePoint. They can be surfaced in a SharePoint list. They can also be surfaced up into Outlook. So you can, right within those two contexts, you can approve or deny a workflow. We also bring across in the ready-to-use capabilities information out of the HR system, and we populate that up into SharePoint in the person's My Profile. So we know their roles, and we know other HR information about them, and I'll show you that in a couple minutes. But then, on top of the ready-to-use capabilities, then Duet Enterprise is completely extensible. So from a developer's perspective, because the infrastructure is already in place for the authentication and authorization and manageability and supportability, because all of that's already in place for you, you can just come on top of that, and the SAP developers can expose up new web services, and you can consume those new web services on the SharePoint side and then light up any kind of .NET UI exposure that you want. So with that, provides a number of things. People are more productive. They're working where they want to, where they are comfortable working within the Office applications and SharePoint. We have the ability to rapidly respond to business needs because, again, we have this infrastructure layer. We need something new on top of it. We have this standard way that we can build and expose up SAP data into our environment. And it expands the value of existing investments in the sense that there's not any new training involved here. Everybody in IT still does what they already do with SAP and with SharePoint. So we leverage the skill set. So let's go ahead and come into the Duet Enterprise environment. How many of you have seen Duet Enterprise demo? Okay, good. All right, so this isn't Duet Enterprise out of the box as far as the way it's skinned. This is a skinned site. We've done some CSS work on it to make it branded for Litware. However, everything you see is out of the box, okay, with respect to the capabilities that you're going to see here. So what we have is this Duet Enterprise site. We can click into customers. And when we click into customers, that retrieves. Again, we're going through a web service, grabbing the data out of SAP, bringing it directly back in. So this is SAP data being exposed. We have products data being exposed. At the Reports Center, here's a number of reports that have been delivered into this document library. But I can click on Reports over here, and Reports Settings over here, this. And this will take a second to refresh. And this has retrieved all of, I'm logged in as Maria Sanchez, and this has retrieved all of the reports that Maria Sanchez has rights to over on the SAP side. Okay, so these are all of her reports. And from SharePoint, any of these reports can be submitted over into SAP to run. And then that report, when it runs, it will come back into her report center. Okay? So that's a ready-to-use capability that's built into Duet Enterprise. Also in the Task Center, these are the workflows that Maria needs to manage. So here's her purchase order workflows that have started over on the SAP side, and now they are waiting approval over here and showing over here on the SharePoint side. So she can manage those directly from here, and we'll see another way in just a couple seconds. But let's go ahead and see some of the other ready-to-use capabilities in Duet Enterprise. So here's Maria. Maria is going to travel to this company called the ARI Group. So she wants to do some collaboration around this company with her colleagues. So she simply clicks Open Workspace, and now with the ready-to-use capabilities, any one of these customers has this open workspace opportunity, okay, as a selection item. As well as when we went over to the products list, it has an open workspace on it. So any customer, any product can be collaborated around. And so in this case, she wants to visit this company, but now she can also, from right directly in SharePoint, she can edit this customer. And as long as she has permissions to be able to edit and save, she can change this customer, and to a save on the customer's information, it will save back directly into SAP. So the data that we're seeing here is SAP data that's being pulled directly into her context. In this case, this is not an out-of-the-box capability, but just a very simple little Bing map. She wants to travel to this company, and we just take the address of this company and throw it into a Bing map, and she can have context about that. Okay? So, you have to have internet connectivity for it. All right. So in this case, she also has her customer contacts here, and she can either create a new contact or she can edit a contact directly within SharePoint. And again, if she edits a contact, makes any changes, it's saved back directly into SAP. Now also, she can invite other staff members into this collaboration workspace so she can work with them. But she can also submit reports directly from this workspace. Let's say she wants a list of sales orders. So she can submit a report directly from this workspace. All the parameters that you see here that are required are parameters that have been defined in SAP that are being surfaced here. And she can submit the report directly from here, and it will come back into her reports library. Did I click all of that off? I did. Okay. Let's just go directly into her customers again here. I think I was through with most everything. Just to make sure. Yeah. All right. So again, she can upload documents. Again, this is a collaboration workspace. Now, with respect to what she can she do with these customers in an offline capacity, so she can synchronize these customers directly down to SharePoint Workspace. So again, these customers in SharePoint Workspace can be surfaced for editing and for saving back. Again, as long as she has the right permission, she can make those changes and save the customer information. As well as in Outlook, if we go into her contacts, we have also simply exported or synchronized down into Outlook all of the contacts that she has within her customers. So here you can see all of her contacts. And again, editing any one of these will synchronize back automatically into SAP. Now, that's good. We saw over on the SharePoint side where she could approve workflows and work with workflows over there. But she can also work with workflows if she has Office or Outlook 2010 on her desktop. She can also work with workflows directly in Outlook. So in this case, she's been notified that there's something to do on a workflow. She can double click on it and she can open the task. This is a custom ribbon element. So from Duet Enterprise, she can open the task, and here that same info path form that would be used for approval over on the SharePoint side is surfaced directly in Outlook, right in the flow of her work, and she can approve, reject, or cancel out of that. Now, if Office 2010 is not on the desktop, but you have Office 2003 or you have Office 2007, then of course you have the links directly in the email that take you back to the SharePoint site, and you can approve the workflow there. So with Office 2010, you get some additional capabilities here. All right, so that's the ready-to-use capabilities that we have in Duet Enterprise, and those are out of the box and available. So just a high-level architecture, we have on the SAP side, we have a Duet Enterprise add-on. And on the SharePoint side, we have a Duet Enterprise add-on. And then, of course, we can have this interaction out on the clients as well. And what I like to think about with the Duet Enterprise product, I like to think of it as engineered interoperability, because it's the SharePoint people of Microsoft, a special team in Microsoft that built out all of the SharePoint components. Okay? The experts built the Duet Enterprise SharePoint side, and they worked hand in hand with the SAP experts that surfaced up the web services. And they both worked together to build out that interoperability layer for the authentication and authorization capabilities. Now, one last thing just to show you for Maria is I'll go into Maria's profile here. And I had mentioned that we have custom properties that we bring into SharePoint with respect to SAP. So you can see over here on the left-hand side that we have all of her SAP roles. This is all being managed for us. So those roles can be used on the SharePoint side to permission lists and give permissions to various types of things you want on the SharePoint side as well. And then we bring in information out of the SAP HR system so that we have that information over here and available in SharePoint, and we can use that as well with respect to her profile. Okay. So I like to think of it as engineered interoperability. And on the Microsoft side in SharePoint, within the add-on, we have the application and template services that are all pre-built and available to you. Application building blocks, we don't have time to go into those, but all the runtime services that Duet Enterprise provides for us, again, with that manageability and supportability layer. And it's built on business connectivity services. Okay? And then over on the Duet, on the SAP side, we have the Duet Enterprise add-on, and it sits on top of essentially the service consumption layer for SAP. So that's the path to expose up, that's used to expose up the web services on the SAP side. Now, what's the difference here? We've gone through this slide once before. The biggest difference in what you don't have to do is that you don't have to do all of that upfront stuff. From a developer's perspective, you simply can pick up on where you want to build out maybe some new ECTs, okay? Because from the Duet Enterprise side, it manages all of that securing for you. So then you can begin to just consume that, the ready-to-use capabilities, you can just consume that by building on top of that with the different user experiences that you want to surface. These are the out-of-the-box ones. You can do others. Again, you have the same skill set that's being leveraged with Duet Enterprise. There's nothing new to learn here. SAP developers do the types of things that they need to do to expose up web services. You have power users in the middle that might be someone within SharePoint that can use SharePoint Designer and do some of these things, be able to build no-code solutions on top of these. But then if you need to drop down into .NET, then your .NET developer is going to be using the same tools that they always use. Where do the Microsoft tools begin? We create the external content type, customize the external list, and connect it. So let's take a look now at a solution that was built on top of Duet Enterprise as an extensibility point. Okay. Duet Enterprise exposes up customer inquiry, exposes up a number of web services, but there are some that it doesn't expose, okay? There might be additional things that you want to do. So in this case, we wanted to expose up a service order. So we'll go ahead and open this service order. Now this gives us the opportunity to lay Silverlight on top of the data so that we can have a new way to visualize the data. So what SAP developer did, exposed the SAP sales order entity for us. What we did on the Microsoft side is connect up an ECT to that web service, exposed an external list, and now that that external list is there, now we have this Silverlight application using the client object model and using a Silverlight graphing tool, which is just a control you can download for free, using that to be able to surface data in a new way and in a new UI. So we still have the list data. We've still retrieved this data out of SAP. But now we are have this data visualization in SharePoint with Silverlight. So now I can just simply hover over each of these different data points here. I can see the sales order revenue for each of those months. I can hover over the bars. I can again see the sales order revenue. So now I can see my trends in my data. But if I want to narrow this down, I can simply select across. And by making a selection down in the line chart, I now have my bar charts been refreshed up on top to be across that specific set of dates. But now I can also go ahead and click on any one of the bars, and I can see a breakdown for the sales order revenue by each of the regions. And that chart then is dynamically drawn as I click across the different bars. So now I'm simply using Silverlight on top of SAP data, but now I can have this nice data visualization over the top of it. I can also click on this list right here, and then I just simply can see the straight list data. This list data is being retrieved one time, being held in memory, and I can then put the analysis on top of it. Now let's look at just how this was exposed up. We'll go ahead and go into SharePoint Designer. And in SharePoint Designer, this is the Duet Enterprise site. We'll go into External Content Types. And this is all the goodness of Duet Enterprise right here, okay? You as the developer, did not have to build all of these web services and all of these external content types and work with the securing of them. This is a part of the Duet Enterprise install. So you can see that there are a number of namespaces that have been identified here. Here's the customer inquiry information. And there's more data being exposed here, or right here, than is actually being exposed up in the SharePoint UI. So as developers, you can come in and you can look at this and you can say, well, I'd like to have these additional fields here and there. And you can put your own user experiences on top of these external content types that already exist. Now in this case, we wanted to expose the sales order information. Let me just show you, let's go ahead and click into this one right here real quick. And to show you, if we go into the account, again, what we have, it's just like what you would have done yourself, except we have some magic happening here, and that's called claims-based authentication. So under the covers, as far as the Duet Enterprise authentication and authorization scheme, they're using claims-based authentication. So that's what that's doing, is helping manage the user ID from SharePoint and being able to access the correct user over on the SAP side. So claims-based authentication is working here for us. That also gives us the single sign-on. Okay? Now that's the infrastructure that's in place. So let's go ahead and we'll close that out. We'll pop into our external content type here for sales order. And we'll look at sales order. And so again, the web service is exposed. We simply tap into the fact that we have claims-based authentication available to us, and we put the endpoint for the WSDL and the endpoint for the web service, and that's all it takes. So that's how we can connect up. Expose it up, connect to it, and then put user experiences on top of it. All right. So let's go ahead. And that user experience would be, one of those would be Silverlight. So the Microsoft tools that were used in this solution, okay, so we have SharePoint Designer. Again, it's used for declarative and no code. It creates lists and libraries. We can build designs and views, but it's where we wire up our external content types. We have Expression Blend 4. So the Silverlight application that you saw, we used Expression Blend 4 with the Silverlight graphing control so that we could expose the data in a nice graphical chart form. Then we used Visual Studio. Once you get the expression blend work all done, you can simply export that out. Visual Studio can pick that up, and that's where we wired up all the data connectivity. And then lastly, Silverlight is the user experience that we render in. So what are the steps? The steps are to expose the data on the SAP side using the traditional methods and ways to expose the data. Then, as well, on the SAP side, you're going to compose that data in the service consumption layer. And then in SharePoint, you're going to consume the data through an external content type, expose it up in an external list, and then put all the different types of user experiences on top of it that you want, whether it's Silverlight, JavaScript, or the rich client applications, or any other rich client application that you want to build, whether it's WCF or whether it's WPF or Windows Forms. Okay, with that, any questions? Let me just preface all of this by saying I'm not a sales guy. Okay, so I don't know anything about pricing. If you want to know about pricing, I need to have you talk to the SharePoint people down in the pavilion. But okay, questions, and if I could have you go to the microphones, that would be great. And if I can't answer your question here, we'll go downstairs afterwards and we'll talk about it. So thank you very much for those of you that must leave. Appreciate it. Please fill out your evaluations. Yes, sir.
Hi. Two questions, I guess. The SAP versions you have there, those are the minimum requirements, I assume?
That's correct. That's correct. But that's for the Duet Enterprise piece to sit on NetWeaver. But as far as the SAP systems that might be at older versions, it can manage all of that. Okay, NetWeaver, you can have different versions underneath, but this is the piece that has to have Duet Enterprise sitting on it.
And then I'm not entirely clear on the service consumption layer. It seems like with just SharePoint, you could consume the web service that was exposed directly on your ECC system. I'm not clear on what the service consumption layer is for.
Right, the service consumption layer is the pathway to build up to expose your web service. Okay, so we don't connect to the service consumption layer itself, and we connect to the web service.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, I think I'm with you
Is
now.
the litware example available out there on the web?
The litware, no, it's not. No, it's not. Only the SAP example that I'll be putting out there that's, a developer version.
Is there anybody we can follow up with to find out, it'd be a whole lot easier to throw this together if you had something that was you guys had already started with?
Well,
and we can talk about it later down.
Yeah, and that's what Duet Enterprise is. I mean, Duet Enterprise is a product that's both licensed by Microsoft or by SAP.
And we own all of that already.
Oh, okay.
And we're going to start dropping it down a couple of boxes and Monday when I get back. So
oh, okay. And there are some training opportunities we could try and find for you too.
You showed that you could synchronize the SAP roles
Yes.
to SharePoint. Can I use that roles to secure SharePoint data, documents, folders, and all that?
Yes, you can. That SharePoint data, those roles are available to you in SharePoint. Right. Then
that means if I go to a document library and say that, okay, this SAP role has permission, and someone goes in SAP and change the user's permission to now they have their role.
That should, yes, that should work. And I would love to maybe talk with you down in the pavilion, and we need to confirm. We'll confirm that up. But yes, right, that's the purpose.
The other quick question is, what are the caching capabilities as far as the BCS? Like if I have a customer information as an example, I don't want to go to SAP every time because this probably doesn't change so often. Absolutely.
So there are ways to configure the BCS, and you would definitely. This is the nice thing about IT being involved in this, as well as the way that it has been engineered. because there are caching capabilities as well as filtering capabilities. And those you would want to use because you don't want everybody pulling back everything. And so those things have been taken into consideration with Duet Enterprise, and you definitely would want to
What
use
if you
them.
don't have Duet then? Can you do that just with SharePoint Designer when you are creating the external content and connecting to SAP service as an example?
That's
They
a
say
good...
that I could cache that data and say, okay, I just grab the data every 4 hours or something like that.
Right, I don't believe you have control over the caching in BCS because it manages its own caching, okay? So the only place you can really cache, you have control to cache, is if you've taken it offline or if you've taken it out into your application. You know, you could cache it. But so we'd have to drill into that, okay?
Are the features that we saw, like the customers and the purchase orders and that kind of thing from inside Duet, are those just the ones that are out of the box? And
That's
I think
correct.
you mentioned HR, and then there's everything else. You'd have to do that kind of add-ons to it and build them yourself, like manufacturing, for example, or inventory.
That's correct. That's correct. What you saw were the out-of-the-box, ready-to-use capabilities to give you some kind of a quick value. But then the other ones you would need to expose.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Are you going to put this PowerPoint presentation online? I didn't see it on the TechEd website.
Oh, yeah. It's been turned in, so it should absolutely be out there.
Thank
You
you.
bet. Okay. Thank you very much.